Hello, goblins. Hope you're good. It's Chris, Eldritch Pipes. After another blip last week of doing other things and not getting a video together, I have a bumper crop this week. And a few other, one other little bit to chat about. I'm smoking Tilbury in the acorn. Trusty acorn. Before we get to the pipes, the one bit of note is I've been working on the next resin, which is going to be the vintage colours, some of the vintage colours, with a swirl, and one new vintage colour to go in that collection. So a couple of colours won't make it into the vintage swirl. They don't really make a lot of sense. The yellow is so bright in the vintage range, and the orange and the green, so gamma green, cosmic orange, Yithian yellow, won't make it into that range. I've got a feeling racing green won't make it either, because it's just not, I don't think it's going to play well with the look. However, one colour that didn't make it into the sort of the single colour vintage range, because it was too dark. It was so dark you couldn't even tell what colour it was, which I suppose was interesting in its own way. But it really was super dark, was violet. And I think the violet is going to work really well in the vintage swirl. So let me just show you first two attempts. The very first attempt got me nowhere, and I'll explain why. So this was the first amber. I mean, as you can see, very pretty. Lots of sort of detail. It's got a sort of like a gorgeous sort of flame look to it. And this was the Yeti Blue. Now, nice in their own way, but they don't do what they need to do, which is in vintage bakelite, when you get these swirls of pattern, they have real depth to them. It's almost like your brain really interprets the patterns as like seeing colour sort of like diving into the depths. It's like you can see into the stem. And you probably can slightly, but it has this real sense of depth to it. Now, I don't know if you can see here, but especially on the Yeti Blue, the colour is just sitting on the surface. The white is just on the surface. There's no sense of depth at all. It's just blue and white. In the amber, it's slightly different. Obviously, the white has taken on some of the hue of the amber, so it's sort of more harmonious. But it's still, there's not a lot of depth to it. It's still kind of sitting on the surface. And so as pretty as it is, didn't really work out. So, test number 2. I'll do the Yeti Blue first. Now, this one you can begin to see it's not just blue and white, but there's like a gradient between the blue and white as well. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the opacity of the white has really killed the vibrancy of the Yeti Blue. So the Yeti Blue is looking really kind of a bit drab, which is not what we want here. So although we're getting somewhere, we're not there yet. The best result so far was with the amber on the second test. Now this is super cool. So you have the dark of the pure amber. You have where the white coming to the surface, it's sort of its lightest, but it also goes through these gradients. And that sort of like gives you this like, this depth, this sort of like peering into the stem. This is the look we're looking for. So amber for the range is sorted. Just another 6 to go. There you go. Vintage amber. Probably at the rate I'm going, probably won't be ready till the end of the year. I'll be getting some English pipe makers to try it out and see what kind of results we wind up getting. High hopes though, high hopes. So, this week's pipes. The first one, first of all I have to do a shout out to him as well, Charles Chiappetti, who's keeping me stocked up in Rustica, HH Rustica, and also got me some, it's Peter Heinrich's Strong Dark Flake. Super lovely. Thanks so much, Charles. And you've been waiting so patiently for your pipe. And here's a look at it. It is a Slender Man. Black sandblast. Really nicely detailed little sandblast there. You can see absolutely hoofs of ring grain. And even see the straight grain there as well. Not too wild plateau, actually kind of even plateau. Which is, it's the way it is. This one paired with a mother of pearl stem. So you can see that sort of like flecking green. And when the light hits it from the other direction, it goes into a bit of purple as well. So there you go. I haven't made a Slender Man in a little while, so it's nice to be able to do one. And in fact, now while I put this guy away, I did another. But this time in a finish that is becoming more popular, especially for Slender Man. Hope you can see there. So yes, it is a Slender Man again. This time with the iridescent finish. Again, lots of ring grain popping out there. Which is very nice. A bit more rugged plateau there. Nice detail on that blast. You never know. You just never know what a piece of briar is going to do. Obviously you can align the grain, but how well a piece of briar blasts is an unknown thing. And then this one obviously paired with mother of pearl stem. it's kind of interesting me getting to see it in the camera as well, because it's like it blows it up. You can see lots of detail. All right. The next two was a 2-pipe commission. And the chap threw me a curveball. You did, Charlie. You threw me a curveball. The commission was booked for about 8 months, which is my sort of like wait list at the moment. And then just as his pipe was about to come up, I was just going, oh, what pipe stem material, colours are we looking at? So he picked some colours and then said, oh yeah, I'm fit for 9mm. Really, Charlie? Now, if you do, if you want a 9mm pipe, it's best to let the pipe maker know well in advance, because not every shape does a 9mm well. In fact, there are some shapes that I won't do with 9mm. I've talked about that before. Some shapes can be tweaked, but I need time to rejig a design. So, and yes, I'll leave that there. So anyway, I had a couple of pipes to do. So both of these are 9mm. I hope I'm not opening some kind of doorway to hell by suddenly announcing I've made some 9mm pipes. I hope not. But anyway, the first was actually a really interesting challenge. So the first was a print. Now I love making princes. It's one of my favourite shapes to do. But my normal prints wouldn't even nearly begin to fit a 9mm. So I had to design this fellow from scratch. I had to size him up. So he's more of a handful than my normal prints. But I'm pretty pleased with the shape of the bowl. The print it's a lot to do with not just the shape of the bowl, but the balance between the bowl and the shank, and the bowl and the shank stem sort of proportions. Yeah. Aside from that, nice little black blast. And this guy got paired with an emerald stem. A nice piece as well. So that was the first piece in this 2-pipe commission, the easier of the two pieces. The next one, Charlie wanted something more extravagant, so I was thinking, what could I do that would fit the 9mm? So I needed something with a good thick shank, and I had a few ideas in mind. In the end, I went with a version of my Mandragora root. And actually, if I recall correctly, so the shank in the original, the stem in the original, is slightly buried into the shank, and the shank was reasonably robust. Maybe that's the word for it. So I thought that'll work for this. In the original, the stem is rusticated as well, but through the fitting 9mm shenanigans in, and the way I kind of perceived this one, I decided to keep this stem smooth. So you can see fitted for 9mm there. So I think probably for safety reasons as well, not wanting to cut too close into the into where the filter is. But heavily rusticated in the mandragora root style. Nice little foot on the bowl. Slightly blasted back to do a green, to sort of put a wash of green over the brown. You get to see some of the grain, and it's just a nice colour effect. That's the crazy bowl. And it's a good handful. So, actually, very pleased with how this guy turned out. So it's kind of a different rendition. In fact, one of the nice things is that I actually kept the plateau on there, which is why it's such a rakish angle. In fact, the rim, you can kind of see where the plateau of the piece went, because the rim follows the plateau as well. And on the original, it's like a straight break, whereas on this one, it's got this lovely angle because of the plateau that I decided to keep. So, there you go. Mandragora root with a filter. Never thought I'd be doing one of those. But now I have. So that was this week's pipes. All done. All right. So, now that things are back to normal, more or less, I hope to be back next week for this week's pipes. It should be about the same kind of time, Friday-ish. All right. So until then, take it very easy, your loyal pipe maker.